We just talked about the different types of plant cells, but now we need to understand how those cells organize themselves to form larger structures. First, let's review the levels of organization in living organisms. Cells are the building blocks of life, but cells are usually organized into tissues, and these tissues will often be organized into organs, and this is true of plants just as it is for animals. Plants have three main types of tissues, and all of these tissues are comprised of the plant cells we discussed in the previous tutorial. So let's go through these types of tissue now. First up, ground tissue makes up the majority of a plant's body, so to speak, and it's broken up into three subgroups based on cell type. Those are the parenchyma, the collenchyma, and the sclerenchyma, which we just learned about. Ground parenchyma tissue is the most common tissue in a plant. It appears in a variety of locations and does many jobs. Parenchyma tissue is responsible for the photosynthetic layer in leaves, called the mesophyll, where the plant performs gas exchange and creates sugars, making its own food. Parenchyma tissue is also how a plant stores excess energy in the form of starches, which are complex polysaccharides. Starch-filled parenchyma tissue can be found in a plant's roots, and parenchyma tissue also makes up the majority of a seed, so that the starches can feed the embryonic plant until it's able to photosynthesize on its own. Additionally, parenchyma tissue is so prevalent throughout a plant that it also takes on the role of growing to cover wounds and replace other tissues lost through physical trauma or disease. Wound closure is an important function for plants just like it is for us, because if a plant has an open wound, then all sorts of pathogens like fungi and bacteria could invade the plant and quickly kill it. The other two subtypes of ground tissue, ground collenchyma tissue and ground sclerenchyma tissue, are also composed of cells by the same names. As we now know, both collenchyma cells and sclerenchyma cells have thick cell walls made of cellulose, and in some cases lignin, which provides structure for a plant. Therefore, ground collenchyma and ground sclerenchyma tissues can be found throughout a plant wherever structural support is most important. But as we said, ground tissues are just one of the three kinds of plant tissue, and these ground tissues are essentially sandwiched between the other two kinds of tissue in a plant. On the external surface of a plant, we can find dermal tissues. This name makes sense because dermal is a word that relates to the skin or exterior of a living organism, so these tissues essentially form a sort of skin for